Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like on this video, and tell us in the comments where you're listening from. Now, let's get into the story. I used to think of my life as something ordinary, safe, predictable. And for me, that was a good thing. I wasn't looking for chaos, or drama, or some kind of movie plot. I wanted the quiet version of happiness, the version where you love your husband, you trust your family, and you never imagine that the people closest to you could be the very ones to destroy your world. My name is Emily, and for a long time I truly believed I had built that kind of life. I had a husband who made me feel loved, a home that felt warm and steady, and even though my relationship with my twin sister was complicated, I still believed deep down that she was someone I could always count on. I thought blood was unbreakable. But blood can also betray you in the cruelest ways. Let me take you back. Before everything fell apart, growing up as a twin shaped everything about me. Lily and I looked exactly alike, down to the same shade of brown eyes and the same birthmark on our left shoulder. Strangers couldn't tell us apart, but those who knew us well always said our personalities were nothing alike. I was the quiet one, the bookworm, the planner. I liked rules, I liked structure. Lily was the opposite, wild, impulsive, reckless. If there was a boundary, she wanted to cross it. If there was attention to be grabbed, she was the first to reach for it. Our parents used to joke that I was the stable twin, and she was the storm. Sometimes I laughed with them, but other times it hurt. Because what people didn't see was how exhausting it was to always be compared to someone who shared your face. I spent so much of my childhood trying to define myself against her shadow. Despite our differences, I loved her. She was my sister, my other half. Even when we fought, even when she did things that embarrassed me, I defended her. I told myself that no matter what, she would always be on my side. By the time we grew into adults, our lives went in separate directions. I went to college, determined to build something stable. Lily drifted from job to job, from relationship to relationship, always chasing the next thrill. I worried about her, but I also envied her sometimes. She seemed free in a way I never allowed myself to be. And then there was Daniel. I met him in a college literature class I didn't even want to take. I remember noticing his handwriting before I noticed him, his careful notes in the margins of a book we were both assigned to read. He smiled at me one afternoon, asked if I wanted to study together, and that was it. Slowly, he became the center of my days. He made me laugh in ways no one else could. He saw the quiet, cautious part of me not as something boring, but as something grounding. We dated through college, graduated, and eventually, he proposed. It wasn't extravagant, just the two of us in our favorite coffee shop, his hands shaking, his voice cracking when he asked. But it was perfect. I said yes without a second thought. Our wedding was small, intimate. Family, close friends, nothing fancy. I can still see Lily standing beside me as my maid of honor, smiling with tears in her eyes. She gave a speech at the reception about how Daniel was lucky to have me, about how we were twins but I was the better half. People laughed, I laughed, but now when I look back, there was something sharp underneath her words. A kind of envy I didn't want to acknowledge. Marriage with Daniel felt easy, at least in the beginning. We moved into a modest house, the kind with creaky floors and a backyard big enough to imagine children playing in one day. He was thoughtful, attentive. He remembered anniversaries, he surprised me with flowers on random Tuesdays, he listened when I talked about work. I thought I had chosen well. I thought I had found my forever, and Lily? She drifted in and out of our lives. Sometimes she'd stay with us for a weekend, sometimes she'd disappear for months chasing some new adventure. Whenever she came around, she brought chaos, but also laughter. Daniel would shake his head at her stories, amused by her recklessness. I thought it was harmless. I thought he saw her the way I did, as family, nothing more. Back then, nothing seemed broken. My days were filled with routines I cherished. Cooking dinner together after work. Watching movies on the couch. Planning trips we never quite took but loved to dream about. I went to bed every night feeling safe, believing I had exactly what I wanted. I had no idea how fragile it all was. I had no idea that the two people I trusted most, the man I married and the sister who shared my face, would one day shatter everything. But before I tell you how it ended, you need to understand how it started. And how easy it is to mistake comfort for security, to mistake love for loyalty. Because love can blind you. And loyalty, I would learn, can be nothing more than an illusion. If Block 1 was about the life I thought I had, then this is where that life started to unravel, thread by thread, in ways so small I almost didn't notice. I look back now and wonder if I ignored the signs because I didn't want to see them, or because love really can blind you. Maybe it was both. The first changes came with Daniel. He had always been consistent, steady in his habits, predictable in the best way. But one day, he started working late more often. At first, I didn't question it. Everyone has deadlines, everyone gets busy. But then it became constant. He'd come home long after dinner, smelling faintly of cologne he didn't wear to the office, his tie loosened, his smile rehearsed. When I asked what kept him so late, he'd shrug and say, "Just work, Em. You know how it is." But it wasn't just the hours. It was his phone. Daniel had never been secretive with it. He'd leave it on the coffee table, face up, while we watched movies. But suddenly, he started keeping it in his pocket, even carrying it into the bathroom. When messages popped up, he'd tilt the screen away. When I asked who it was, he'd answer too quickly, "Just a coworker." Always vague, always dismissive. I tried to convince myself it was stress, that maybe he was planning a surprise for me, something romantic he didn't want me to see. That's how much I trusted him. I bent reality into shapes that fit my hope instead of my fear. And then Lily started showing up more often. She would drop by unannounced, breezing into my house like it was her own. Sometimes she'd bring wine, sometimes she'd bring nothing at all but herself. She'd laugh at Daniel's jokes louder than necessary, touch his arm lightly when she teased him. I noticed the way her eyes lingered on him, but I told myself I was being paranoid. That ugly voice inside me whispered things I didn't want to hear. She wants what you have. She always has. Lily had always craved attention. Growing up, she was the twin who flirted with everyone, who stole the spotlight just to prove she could. But this was different. This was sharper, more dangerous. One evening, I walked into the living room to find them sitting closer than usual. On the couch. They jumped apart when I entered, laughing nervously. Lily said they were just talking about a TV show. I forced a smile, but my chest tightened. Something about the way Daniel looked at her, like he was trying too hard to act normal, made my stomach twist. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling and replayed the scene over and over. My mind screamed at me to connect the dots, but my heart refused. I couldn't imagine my husband, the man who promised to love me forever, crossing that line. And with my sister? My twin? It was unthinkable. Still, the cracks widened. Daniel started pulling away from me physically. He kissed me less, touched me less. When I tried to initiate intimacy, he'd claim he was tired, stressed, not in the mood. It was subtle, but I could feel the distance. The warmth that used to wrap around us like a blanket had thinned into something cold, fragile. Meanwhile, Lily grew bolder. She wore shorter dresses when she came over, styled her hair in ways I knew Daniel liked. She would joke about how lucky I was to have him, how she wished she could find a man like that. But the way she said it, the way her eyes flickered toward him, it didn't feel like a compliment. It felt like a threat I couldn't name. One afternoon, I caught her in my bedroom. She claimed she was looking for a sweater I had borrowed years ago, but her eyes darted around the room too much. On my dresser, next to my wedding photo, I noticed her fingers had lingered. I remember the chill that crawled up my spine as I watched her trace the frame of that picture with her hand, like she was trying to place herself inside it. I should have confronted her then. I should have confronted both of them. But instead, I stayed silent. I told myself families don't betray each other, that sisters don't covet their twin's husband, that husbands don't break vows for something so cruel, and yet, deep down, I knew. The tipping point came one night when I returned home earlier than expected from a work dinner. Daniel wasn't supposed to know, and neither was Lily. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw her car parked out front. My chest tightened, my heart pounding as excuses raced through my head. Maybe she just came to visit. Maybe they were waiting for me inside, but when I opened the door, the house was silent. No laughter, no TV, nothing. Just the creak of the floor under my feet as I stepped inside. I called out for them, but no one answered. Upstairs, I heard faint sounds, muffled voices, whispers, a laugh that froze my blood. I walked slowly, my body heavy, my mind screaming at me to stop. But I kept going. I reached the bedroom door, my hand trembling as I touched the knob. The whispers grew louder. My heart thudded so hard I could hear it in my ears. And then, just as I pushed the door open, silence. That was the moment before the storm. The breath before my world ended, and I had no idea how much it would destroy me. There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. A single instant where the world you thought you knew collapses, and nothing will ever feel the same again. For me, that moment was the night I opened my bedroom door and saw my husband with my twin sister. I pushed the door open, expecting, hoping, for some innocent explanation. Maybe they were just talking. Maybe Lily had gotten drunk again and Daniel was helping her. Maybe my worst fears were only in my imagination, but what I saw stripped away every layer of denial I had left. Daniel and Lily were tangled in my bed. Our bed. The place where I thought love lived, where I had dreamed of building a family, where I had whispered my deepest secrets to the man I trusted most. And there they were, breaking every promise, every bond, every illusion. Lily's face turned toward me first. And it was like staring into a broken mirror, my own features, twisted with guilt and shock. Her eyes widened, her mouth opened, but no words came out. Daniel froze, his body rigid, like a child caught in the act of something shameful. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My mind couldn't catch up with my eyes. It felt like I was watching a nightmare play out in slow motion, like my soul had stepped outside my body to protect itself from the pain. Then it hit me all at once, the betrayal, the disgust, the rage. My throat burned as I screamed. My voice cracked, raw and ugly, but I couldn't stop. I shouted at them, words I can barely remember now, curses I didn't know I was capable of saying. Lily scrambled off the bed, pulling the sheets around her like a shield. Emily, I'm sorry, she stammered, her voice trembling. But hearing my own twin's voice saying those words made me want to tear the walls apart. Sorry? Sorry for what? For stealing my husband? For stabbing me in the back with the one weapon she knew would hurt most? Daniel reached for me, his hands shaking. It's not what you think, he said. The oldest, weakest excuse in the world. His voice cracked as he tried to explain, but there was no explanation. The evidence was right in front of me. The man I had loved, the man I had trusted with my whole life, had chosen her. I grabbed the nearest thing I could reach, a lamp on the nightstand, and threw it across the room. It shattered against the wall, pieces scattering like the pieces of my heart. My chest heaved, my body trembling with rage and heartbreak. I wanted them gone, both of them. I wanted to erase them from my house, from my life, from my memory, but you can't erase something burned that deep. Lily kept crying, begging, trying to cover herself. It just happened, she said. Those 3 words seared into me like fire. It just happened. As if betrayal were an accident. As if bodies just fell together by mistake. Daniel tried again, his voice desperate. It didn't mean anything, Em. Please, listen to me. I love you. It was a mistake. A mistake? Months of late nights, secret smiles, hidden touches, that wasn't a mistake. That was a choice. Over and over, he chose her. And she chose him. I felt sick. Literally sick. My stomach churned, my knees weak. I stumbled back, clutching the door frame like it was the only thing keeping me from collapsing. My vision blurred with tears, hot and endless. I remember shouting at them to get out. Over and over, the words came out like a mantra. Get out. Get out. Get out. My voice echoed through the house, shaking with fury. Lily was the first to move, slipping past me, her face pale and wet with tears. For the first time in our lives, I didn't see my sister. I saw a stranger wearing my face. A stranger who had destroyed everything sacred between us. Daniel hesitated, still trying to reach me, still pleading. Emily, please, we can fix this. Don't throw us away over one mistake. His words cut deeper than silence ever could. Us? There was no us anymore. The moment he touched her, he killed us. I grabbed his clothes from the dresser and hurled them at him. Pack your things and leave, I screamed. My hands shook so violently I could barely breathe. You don't get to stay here. Not after this. Not in my house. Not in my bed. His eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. He had cried to me before, when life was hard, when we were supposed to be a team. But those tears now meant nothing. They were a performance, a desperate attempt to hold on to the safety he had shattered. When he finally left, slamming the door behind him, I collapsed to the floor. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. My body shook, my chest ached, and my heart felt like it had been ripped out of me. I sat there for hours, staring at the broken lamp, the tangled sheets, the empty doorway. Everything around me was the same, yet nothing was the same. That night was the funeral for the life I thought I had. And I wasn't sure how to keep living in the ruins. When Daniel slammed the door that night, the sound reverberated through the house like an earthquake. It wasn't just a door closing, it was the collapse of everything I thought my life was built on. I sat on the floor, knees pulled to my chest, surrounded by broken glass from the lamp I had thrown. The air felt heavy, like it carried the ashes of my marriage, of my trust, of my own identity. Hours passed, but I didn't move. My phone buzzed again and again, Daniel calling, Lily texting. I couldn't bring myself to answer. Every vibration was a reminder of the betrayal I had witnessed with my own eyes, a reminder that the 2 people who should have protected me had instead chosen to destroy me. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me into a restless sleep on the floor. When I woke up, sunlight was streaming through the window, but it felt wrong. It felt like light didn't belong in a house where so much darkness had entered. That morning, the reality set in. The empty side of the bed. The faint smell of his cologne still lingering in the sheets. The silence where there used to be laughter. It wasn't just heartbreak. It was humiliation. I had been made a fool in my own home, in my own marriage. In the one relationship I thought was unshakable, I packed Daniel's remaining clothes into garbage bags and left them on the porch. When he came back that afternoon, standing at the door with his head bowed and his hands trembling, I refused to open it. He begged. he pleaded. His voice cracked as he promised it would never happen again, but the thing about betrayal is that it's not just about the act itself. It's about the choice. Every lie, every secret, every moment he touched her instead of me, it was a choice. And I couldn't forgive choices that deliberate, that cruel. Lily tried too. She called me endlessly. Left voicemails sobbing, saying she didn't know how it happened, saying she regretted it the second it started. She wrote letters, pages of apologies, trying to explain that she was lost, that she envied me, that she hated herself. I never opened them. I didn't need her words. Her actions spoke loud enough. When my parents found out, they were devastated. My mother wept, holding my hands, torn between her daughters. My father was silent, angry in a way I had never seen before. They didn't know how to stand by me without abandoning Lily. But I made the choice for them. I told them I didn't want her in my life anymore. I couldn't sit at the same table, couldn't pretend at family holidays, couldn't look at her face, my own face reflected back at me, and not remember that night friends reacted in different ways. Some were outraged on my behalf, others whispered behind my back, spreading the story like gossip. Being betrayed by a husband and a sister doesn't just hurt, it humiliates you in public. People looked at me with pity, like I was fragile glass about to shatter. I hated that look almost as much as I hated what had been done to me. The weeks after were the darkest of my life. I cried until my eyes burned, screamed into pillows until my voice broke, stared into the mirror until I didn't recognize myself. Nights were the worst. The bed was cold, the silence suffocating. I replayed the moment over and over, the way Daniel's body froze, the way Lily's eyes widened, the sheets tangled around them. It looped in my mind like a cruel film reel that never ended. I questioned everything. Was I not enough? Was I boring, predictable, too safe? Did Daniel love me at all, or had he been waiting for a chance to escape? Had Lily always hated me in some hidden corner of her heart? The doubts ate at me, not at the core of who I thought I was, but somewhere in that darkness, a small spark ignited. Maybe it was survival instinct, maybe it was anger, maybe it was both. But one night, sitting alone in the living room surrounded by the wreckage of my marriage, I realized something. This wasn't my shame. I hadn't cheated. I hadn't lied. I hadn't broken vows. They did. The shame was theirs, not mine. And I refused to carry it anymore. That realization didn't fix everything overnight, but it was the beginning. I started small. I cleaned the house, throwing away the sheets, the clothes, anything that smelled like him. I repainted the bedroom, covering the walls with a fresh color so I wouldn't see ghosts every time I walked inside. I changed my routines. Instead of waiting for him to come home from work, I went out for walks, joined a book club, forced myself to rediscover pieces of myself I had neglected. Daniel tried to come back, over and over. Flowers on the porch, long emails, teary voicemails. He said he had made a mistake, that he wanted to rebuild. But every time, I remembered his hands on her, his eyes looking guilty instead of loving, and I knew there was no rebuilding. You can glue something back together, but it will never be whole again. And I refused to live with cracks. Lily was harder to erase. Not because I missed her, but because she was part of me, literally. Looking in the mirror was torture. I saw her face in mine, and mine in hers. It was a daily reminder of the betrayal. For a long time, I couldn't even say her name out loud. To me, she stopped being my sister. She became a ghost, a wound I refused to reopen. Months passed, and slowly, painfully, I began to heal. Healing didn't mean forgetting. Healing meant carrying the scar without letting it define me. It meant accepting that the people I trusted most had failed me, But that didn't mean I had failed myself. 1 year later, I stood in the same house, in the same bedroom, and felt something I thought I'd never feel again: peace. Not because I forgave them. I never will. But because I forgave myself for trusting them. I stopped blaming myself for their choices. Today, when I tell this story, people always ask me if I miss them. If I'd ever take Daniel back, if I'd ever reconcile with Lily. The answer is simple: no. I don't miss them. Because the people I loved don't exist anymore. They died the moment they chose betrayal. What remains are only strangers who were familiar faces. I tell this story not because I want pity, but because I want anyone listening to understand something I learned the hardest way possible. Betrayal can break you, but it can also remake you. Yes, my husband cheated on me with my twin sister. Yes, it destroyed me. But it also forced me to rebuild, stronger than I ever thought I could be. I lost them, but I found myself, and in the end, that is the one relationship I will never betray again.